Hey, everybody, this is Perpetual Motion, a podcast focused on self-care, communication, personal finance, and positive relationships. I'm your host, Dr. Mo Anderson. In today's episode, we are chatting with Rachel Lauren, a conscious social influencer who is passionate about racial equity, women's rights, and foster care, in addition to being a founding partner for a diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting firm. She is also the proud adoptive mom of 3 children. We're talking equity, activism, and adoption today. Stay tuned to learn why they matter and how they are intertwined. First, however, I need one quick favor, folks. If you're new to the show, or a returning visitor, let's make this official and hit that subscribe button now. So let's go.
You can't say Dr. Mo ain't tell ya that fear magnifies the consequences of failure. What are you scared of? Why are you afraid? I'd rather live like I'm dying than live to die. Any day, my heart is pure, my soul is safe.
Hello, Rachel. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Dr. Mo. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's totally my pleasure. And you're right here in the Lone Star State, too. We should be doing this in person just down the road from me in Austin. Where are you from originally, and how did you make your way to Austin, my favorite place in the world?
Really? Yes, we'll have to meet in person next time. I am from Chicago, Illinois, originally born and raised. So when people say I'm from Austin, I make sure to let them know I'm from Chicago through and through. But I've been here in Austin for about 7 years. It's actually work that brought me to Texas. I originally moved to Houston, and at the time was managing a territory where I was able to kind of choose where I wanted to live. And from visiting Austin, I preferred Austin over Houston.
Understood. Okay, well, I'm glad you like it. I love it. Seriously, let me take that back. Paris is my favorite place in the world. Austin is my favorite place in the United States. We'll go with that. Both separate but equal in my mind. So tell me a little bit about your background. You do so many things. I was looking at your one sheet, Rachel. I could do 5 different full shows from diversity, equity, and inclusion, which we'll be using DE&I the rest of the show, folks. Adoption, conflict resolution. Oh my goodness, such an incredible background. How did you come to be this multi-hyphenate?
The real answer is I love people. And I found myself, no matter what I was doing, I started off in sales, I was in tech, but it was always about people. And I found myself realizing the inequities within, organizations. I was the token a lot. I would raise my hand to say, this needs to happen for people that look like me. And I would say DEI became like my side desk job until I realized you owe me some money for this. And
hello.
The world where this is needed, right? So DEI work came from my love of people, from my love of my people. And really just wanting to make a better world. And I would say the same thing for, my motherhood journey, fostering and adoption, and just even some of the activism that you can see happen on my page.
Right. And that passion and compassion is something that we share. And so much of what we do, we don't get paid. That's the part people don't get. So for, every dollar you get, you don't know how many people you've talked to for free, and you've counseled and given advice and assisted that just, and we don't need it recorded, but sometimes people forget there's a lot that goes on that you never ever see. So I already know how hard you work without even knowing you. I know just from what you're doing. So thank you for that. I'm wondering, there's been so much lately. We're going to start kind of with the DE&I space. There's been so much lately, so many events, not just African Americans, but for Asian Americans, for Native Americans. Have there been any precipitating events or any particular events that made you even more passionate about that area, or did it just make you want to go harder at it?
You'll hear, I think, a lot of people, but especially people in my field, that realized that DEI finally got some of the attention that it's needed around COVID and specifically George Floyd.
Right.
I would say when George Floyd was murdered, a lot of people had no choice but to pay attention. And, there were some organizations that had the performative needle in mind and raised their hand and said that they would do X, Y, and Z from a performative standpoint. But I do believe that the industry, just diversity, equity, and inclusion in the work that we do, took a turn at that point because people started to realize not only is this real, but that it was their responsibility to do something about it.
Yes.
So I would say that really opened a lot of hearts and minds, and we haven't arrived, but I do think that it has started some really necessary conversation, and it's actually enabled people to look into other communities, like you mentioned,
Yes.
and see some of the inequities in them too.
Yes, absolutely. Good points. And when you talk about performative, for people who don't understand what that means, it's checking a box saying I'm an ally, showing up at an MLK, traditionally showing up at MLK and knowing lift every voice and sing better than I do, but then where are you the rest of the year?
That part.
And I'm curious about, I won't name any companies, but recently there have been some, probably Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies who took a stand in one direction and then they got a little bit of pushback and folded. What do you think about that when cases like that happens?
Well, I think that's the thing that we all have to pay attention to.
Right.
A lot of us got behind some of these companies feeling like, oh, okay, they're for us. They're going to speak up. There's some changes that are happening. But it really is upon us, and it's our responsibility to pay attention to the longevity, to the whole plan. So you said you were going to do this, and what are you actually doing? And there's got to come a point where the people that are working for the organization are holding them accountable. The people that are supporting the organization, whether it be with our dollars or any other means, are holding them accountable. The reason why a lot of individuals and organizations chose the performative route was because they were trying to please people. So if we say we're not pleased, right, then that can hold them to the fire. And I just don't think that that's happening. The other thing that I tell people, you mentioned allyship. I do not believe that you can be an ally if you are a self-named ally. So in order for you to be an ally, that means whoever it is you're allying for needs to say so.
Ooh, preach. Preach.
The truth is sometimes allies come in and they think that they're helping, but they're harming. That can mean, maybe you're in a conversation where you're trying to speak up and be a voice for someone that has continuously never been heard. Maybe they don't need you to be a voice. Maybe they need you to make room so that their voice can be heard. There's just different things that different communities need at different times. And I think sometimes allyship goes a little far where people are trying to decide what is needed for others and not actually listen and learn.
Agreed. And I've seen that a lot in corporate America, but just across the board, you make some excellent points. So for those who really, really want to help, so you're a small business or a large business, and you understand that your culture, your diversity is not where it should be, what are some starter steps, if you will, for businesses who want to become more inclusive and build a cohesive culture?
I think for an external position, you have to pay attention to what your business does. What is it? So what are the things that you are closest to? Usually the people that are closest to the problem are closest to the solution. So that's the first place to start. I think sometimes organizations decide that they're just going to raise their hand and their flag at everything, and then nothing is done successfully. And it's because they've got their hand in way too many pots. And so we all have a role to play. So I think the first thing to do is to figure out that role. What can you actually impact? Is there something that might be in alignment with the business that you run? Is there something that you can aid in, give, right? Something that you have readily accessible that can assist with a cause. I think that's the first thing. I tell organizations all of the time, you need to have a DEI mission statement. And that mission statement needs to be the foundation of everything you decide to do, both externally and internally. And I say that because if people that work for the organization don't actually believe in that statement and see it for themselves, then you're
or
not
know
doing
that it exists.
Exactly.
Right. It's not just on the website.
Right. Then you're not doing anything. This
Right.
is just lip service. The people that matter most are in those walls with you, right? Like, so
Right.
how do they feel about your mission statement? Do they really actually believe that you care about the things you say you care about first? Then talk to them. They're in the community most time.
Right.
So what is it that they feel can be done? Sometimes I think that as leaders, we take the role of being the judge, the jury, making the decisions and the plan.
Hmm.
And you hire people for a reason, and you've got to trust the people.
Yeah. Yeah. You really do. And you're right. I'm old school boomer. So we would say the folks in the ivory tower, looking out Marie Antoinette style, but not talking to the people out there who are actually, part of the solution, to get feedback. And you're right, you have people right there within your organizations, and just taking, an annual survey is not going to get it. That needs to be an ongoing conversation, does it not?
It does. And what the annual survey tells you, what are you doing about it? A lot of times we do these surveys and we're saying, oh, look at these results. And then there's no plan in place to change some of those outliers that need to be changed. A lot of times people use those surveys to see what they do well,
Mhm.
not what they don't do well.
Right, and that's what they report on. Look, we made these gains and this improvement, but it's like, what about the other 50 questions y'all asked? I'm not hearing anything about that. And what I hear you saying over and over again is that as individuals or employees, we need to keep our eye on the ball, and to make them accountable, or as shareholders, as investors, that it's not enough that you said you were going to do it. And we, as individuals, are probably dropping the ball on that part. Okay, well, they gave a check, or they hired 3 more minorities, but that can't be the end of it.
Exactly. Yeah, we all have a role to play. And it's really important for us to figure out what that role is.
So, what if you're diverse? Part two of that question, you have the diversity, but what I see so often is, particularly after 2020 and the George Floyd incidents, was that, okay, we need to hire more African Americans, let's promote a couple of people to middle management or VP. But it seems like a lot of times we have the appearance, but they don't have any authority or any autonomy. You got the office, you got the cards, but they're not even able to hire anybody, or have very few people reporting to them. That's tricky if you're an employee looking at that, or if you're in that situation. I mean, how do you have that? How do you introduce that conversation?
Yeah, so I think there's two parts of it. You're right. A lot of organizations look at diversity for what is on the outside. So
Mhm.
race, gender, sexual preference, things that people might talk about or that you can see. But diversity is not limited to that. So you can have a room full of people that come from different ethnicities, but think exactly the same. There's
Right.
no diversity of thought, right? So I think that's the first thing, is challenging your idea of diversity,
Mhm.
and who is, to your point, at all levels throughout the organization. I challenge my organization. I work for dream.org, which is a nonprofit, to consistently stop saying culture fit when they're interviewing people. Think of it as a culture ad, because you're not asking people to come fit into your culture. You're asking people to come and bring their full selves and add to it. We have to be open to evolve. So to answer your question, that's actually part of it. Some of it is
Mhm.
within how we speak about things. You would be surprised the way that you speak about leadership, responsibilities, the words that you use to define your culture. All of that actually impact our mentality. Um, Looking at your policies, your processes, your job descriptions, like, you can find so much just within the words that are written that a lot of people don't pay attention to.
Right.
And so I think that's the first thing to turn over. If we have two people that are directors and they should have the same level of skill and responsibility, but we see that there isn't, right, the same authority, well, then there's a problem within your system. So
Mhm.
how did we arrive here? How did we arrive at the roles, the goals, the job description? And that honestly falls on leadership, management, and human resources,
Yeah.
people operations.
Yeah. Good answer. Good answer. Thank you. You mentioned, and I was going to ask about it later, but we'll jump over to your company, Diversified. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So there's a two-part here. My consulting firm is Diversified, so we actually consult with organizations all over doing exactly what we're talking about right now, DEI work. And then I'm also the chief people officer for dream.org, which is a nonprofit. So that's my full-time all-day gig. And then my
Understood.
consulting firm I'm able to do, and they actually hired me from being a client.
Wow.
I was consulting for them, helping them find someone to fit this role, and made a comment like, "You should just hire me." And then they called me a couple weeks later, and they said, "Are you serious?" And I told them, as long as I can
I
keep my,
can be.
yeah, I said, as long as I can keep my consultant firm, and they have been so supportive of it. And that's the type of organization you want to work for,
Mhm.
right? 'Cause we no longer are in the world of one income, one stream of income, one job. We've got to be able to build legacy for ourselves. And so that was like a selling point to me. But I'm able to bring my practice internal, and then I'm able to still have clients all over. So,
Well, congratulations. Congratulations. And I like what you just said as well, because there's still a lot of leaders who feel like, oh, you're doing these other things, your side gigs and stuff. You're not committed to our company. But I know me that, I have a full-time career as a dental consultant. I speak, I write, I do a lot of other things, but I feel like it makes me a better employee. I'm interacting with people. I'm bringing ideas. I'm having to learn skills that I can bring back to the company. And if you don't take advantage of that, that's not my fault. But when people are getting their job done as you gave it to them and some, because I'm always going to bring 110%, then that should be valued. And we've got to get away from that idea of this is you eat, sleep, and drink our company, or you're not engaged, which is
right.
is the thing they like to throw out there. So I'm so happy that, I mean, that is the ultimate compliment for you. That had to make you feel like really, really good, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we live in this world now where everything is remote. So there
Yes.
really isn't a reason why. Like, if you are seeing that the product that you are looking for, right, is is
Hmm.
is to your standard, and people are doing their jobs, you got to stop policing every part of their day. Like,
Yes.
make sure that they are meeting what it is they said they would meet, and exceeding when they can. But you can't stop them from having a life and other streams of income.
Nor
So,
should you want to. The research has shown as well for our mental health to have, I tell people have multiple streams of happiness, you
yeah,
know?
like
Eh,
that.
not to the point that you're wearing yourself out, but it really does make for a happier person, mind, body, and soul, and better relationships. Because that is the worst conversation in the world that all somebody has to talk about is their job. I don't care how interesting it is. You should be able to converse about something else. But I digress. One more question on D, E, and I, and then we're going to jump over to another topic. Let's talk about pronouns. I was excited to see that this is something that you can educate us on, because it is a bit confusing to me why I need to do this. So why is it important to identify yourself?
Well, so, I think we were all raised with this like heterosexual understanding of identity.
Hmm.
And so that is the female and the male. And so we all kind of just assume that everyone fits into those two identities, right? And that's not fair. It's not a fair assumption. There are individuals who have never felt like they fit in either, and choose not to identify as either. And so allowing people to tell you their pronouns, one, gives you kind of space to not offend, right? So I
Okay,
don't want
that's
to
good.
offend you by saying, just because I think I see you as this, that is who you are. That's the wrong way to have a conversation with someone. And you'll notice, like if you go on LinkedIn, you'll see that people are starting to put their pronouns on their
Hmm.
profiles, or on their Zooms when they're in meetings. And that's really a way to make everyone comfortable, because it's saying, not only do I want to know how you identify, but I don't want you to feel like you are being called out. Like, all of us can say who we are and
Good
identify
point.
and stand in solidarity with the LGBTQ plus community and give you the space to be able to say it so that we're all right clear on who we are. And so, I think that it's a learning curve I get, especially for different generations. I know a
Mhm.
lot of people say, hey, I've always used they as a plural, and I don't know how to use it as a singular. And so I get it. It takes time. And I think we all have to give each other space and grace for the time that it might
Yes.
take to learn. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. And I
Mhm.
think that's the thing of pronouns and just stating yours simply so
Right.
that you can hear someone else's.
I appreciate that. I respect that, and I do it. I mean, where I work corporately, and even here, I've interviewed people who were transgender and lesbian, but in my mind until just now, it was like, okay, whatever you want to be called, I'm down with it. But why do I have to do it? But what you just said makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that. In fact, I was on a court hearing the other day, and the hearing officer asked, and I was like, really? So, and it was not that I think it's wrong, but it helps sometimes if we explain things to people, and like you say, give them space and grace, and keep in mind I've got 50 years of doing things a certain way. So just help me out a little bit and don't chop my head off because, I got it wrong, assuming I'm trying, because I'm not just going to push away anything. I love everybody and accept everybody. I just want to understand.
Yeah. I think the thing, is kind of what you're saying too, is if you think about it, I identify as a woman. And if someone were to see me by society's standards, I look like a woman, right? And I
Hmm.
was born as one. And I'm comfortable with that. I'm not offended if someone, makes that assumption. But imagine what it feels like for people that never felt that way, to have
Hmm.
that assumption and to have to speak up about it and to have to be called out or feel different. And how much easier would it be for us as a world to just realize people need to say who they are and give them the space to, just like you ask what someone's name is.
Yes. Yes, it would be easier, and thank you for that education. I'm in a whole new space now, and I hope other people will listen to this as well and embrace, or at least be open to other ways of doing, because that's the whole reason I do this show is education and understanding and a little bit of entertainment because I like to be silly too. All right, let's get a little more personal. You are a foster to adopt mom of not one, not two, but three children. I'd like to know more about that journey and tell us. Obviously don't want names, but you know, two boys, one girl, that part.
Yes. So I have two girls, one boy, two 8-year-olds, one 6-year-old.
Oh, great ages.
Yes, my oldest, she is 8, my middle is 8, and then my youngest is 6. My girls actually are biological sisters, and they came to me together. And then my son is not biologically related to them, and I actually adopted him first. I was a foster mother and fostered a total of 7 children, and they
Wow.
are 3 out of the 7 that I fostered and then ended up adopting. The journey for each is definitely different, but it was worth it. For sure. There's so many kids that need homes, especially minority children. And
Mhm.
so that for me was the point where I was like, I got to do something about this. So
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Why I attended Greater Mount Zion when I was in Austin. You're probably familiar with Pastor Galen Clark. Shout out to Pastor Clark. And we had people come in many times and talk about the importance of us getting involved, whether it was Big Sisters, Big Brothers, the foster program, adoption. What, what do you think? And it may be I can only speak for the African American community because that's what I know about. But is there an issue overall with minorities not adopting, or is it peculiar to African Americans, and why?
So interestingly enough, when I was licensed, I'll never forget being told that there's a misconception, specifically in the state of Texas, that there are more Black children in the system than white children. What the truth is that there are more Black children left in the system, meaning once they enter, they don't get adopted, whereas the white children do. So when I was licensed, I actually specifically said, I want minority children in my home. And it doesn't mean that all children don't need homes, but if this
Right.
is where there's an issue and these children look like me, then guess what? This is what I want to focus on. And so I do think that it does come from a lack of awareness. It's not something that we talk about in our community that much, just like a lot of things.
Yes, you're
in
right.
our community. And so I think part of it is education. Some of it, there's this idea, this stereotype of what foster children are. And I think to a lot of people, it's like just trouble.
Right,
And
right.
that's
And
not
I hear that I don't know about their genetics. Are they going to have health issues? Are they, were the parents addicted to drugs? And
But I mean, even if you birthed your child, you don't know what's going to happen. You know
yes,
maybe what your genetics are, but you don't know what is in your lineage or
right.
how they might turn out. You can do your best. And I think that that's the same thing with foster children. You just do your best.
Hmm.
Some of them, yeah, they have some horrible history, but they need love even more because of it.
Right.
And love can change a lot. So just looking at my children and how I got them and how they are and seeing that change, I mean, I would do it all over again just for that. And so, there's some people that aren't meant to foster and aren't meant to adopt, but there are so many things, and you pointed out some of them, that can be done to just assist that population.
That's amazing. What if I'm sure there's a lot of training required. I remember what I had to go through to be a big sister. I mean, it was incredible to me. I was like, wait, I have children. And it's important as well, the background checks and all of that. What might someone who's thinking about, becoming a foster parent, just briefly, what type of training or certification or education do you have to go through commitment
The,
wise?
the first thing to note is every state is different. So depending on where you're listening from,
I
you're going to
see.
want to look into each state to know kind of what the requirements are. But generally, there you can get licensed through the state directly, or you
Hmm.
can find an agency that kind of works as an in between you and the state. I recommend an agency because they really can advocate for you, and they can kind of teach you certain things that I don't think the state has time to do. So I say look up, the different agencies in your area and find the one that feels like a fit. I looked at several, and the one that I went with felt like the one that was for me. The other thing to mention is the agencies have to meet all of the state requirements. So whatever the state licensing requirements are, they have to meet those, but every agency might have additional. So that's another factor when you're looking at the agencies to see which one you want to go with. What is it that they're requiring, and do you agree? Does it feel like it's too much or too little or whatever? And go with it from there.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to elaborate on feels like a fit because we've kind of gotten into the mindset of just looking for ratings now. Okay, 5 stars, Fashion Nova, Amazon, she how many stars does it have, which may or may not be an indicator of quality. It may be about popularity. But because most of us haven't had to assess foster care agency before, when you say that one looked like a fit to you, what can you be more specific?
Yeah, so the requirements, they were in alignment with what the state asked. I didn't think that they were too much above kind of the
I
state
see.
requirements. You'll see some agencies ask for a lot of things that you're like, I'm already jumping through so many hoops, and maybe this isn't something that I want to go with. And you can, to your point of ratings, you can talk with former foster parents, current foster parents, anyone that's kind of worked with the agency to see what their experiences were. In the state of Texas, and I think this is really anywhere, if you go on Facebook, there are so many groups of Texas foster and adopt parents, former ones, individuals, like literally any group you can think of under a certain age. And you can go on to those and just talk with parents. I remember when I got licensed, you see people that get really excited. They're like, I'm licensed. I'm waiting for my first phone call. And you'll see parents just going back and forth talking in there. And so people share experiences about the agencies that I think are valid. And then every agency should have, like we talked about earlier, a mission statement, who they say they are. And that should resonate with you in some way. So that's kind of what I looked at.
Gotcha. Good points too. So you need to make yourself familiar with what the state requires first before you go agency shopping or Hopping. Got it. Got it. That makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
You've got so many roles. I kind of alluded to earlier, and I love that. That is in nowhere criticism because I am that girl, like 40 years later. But how do how do all these roles align, come together in your daily life? And I'm getting to the point of what they have in common, but additionally your work life balance, because so many people are challenged by that, particularly right now with the remote work, which I honestly feel like I work more than I did when I was going into the
Hey.
office, Rachel. Yeah.
It's funny that you asked that. There was something you said earlier that made me think of this question. I'm glad you did because we just talked about like all of the things that you do and feeling like you have some level of like a hobby or like you have some level of like non-work. And I got to be honest, I mean, it's still a struggle for me. It's not something I've mastered. It's something that I have to work at.
Mhm.
The way that I'm able to kind of blend it all together is really where we started the conversation, which is people. For me, it all comes down to that, and they all happen to flow beautifully together. So, like, even my activism for Black life or for foster children, it still stems from kind of a place that my profession is in, which is the equity, right? Idea, the diversity, the inclusion. And that isn't just in an organization, that's in a community, that's in this world. So it just kind of blends for me. But I will say, I had a mentor tell me once that Black women specifically do not know how to have a hobby.
Oh
And
my.
it was an ouch moment for me because I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, tell me something that you like to do. And I'm naming the things I like to do. And they're like, tell me what you do that you didn't monetize. Like, tell me what it is that you have done that you haven't turned into a business somehow or tried to make. And I'm like,
Mm,
every time I like
wow.
something, I'm like, "Ooh, I should turn this into a business." Ooh, like there was one point where I was taking bar classes and I loved it, the
Mhm.
exercise bar. And I'm like, "Oh, I should get licensed." I'm looking into being an instructor now. Like it's it is crazy, but it comes from, guess what? Equity, because we haven't had the same seat at the table.
Right.
So for us, hustling has been passed down to us in every generation. We had no choice. So the way that we look at the world is like the same way that our grandmothers did. And everything is about making sure that our kids can eat and live and they're better than we were. And so when we find something we're good at, we figure out how to make money on it.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I think there are things that will happen with, but you got to have something for yourself. So
Right.
I constantly try to challenge myself to find that thing. And sometimes it changes because you might
Right.
start getting sick of it, whatever.
So the self-care piece,
Yes.
yes, we can definitely be missing that. You're right.
Yeah.
And I would add to that, we don't know how to just be alone as well. Oh, I got to get the girls together. Oh, I got to, swing by and get these folks. Oh, I got to include. No, you can just sit and do nothing. Nobody has to be involved because that introduces service because we are givers. So I got to make sure everybody's all right. Everybody has a drink. I'm cutting up food. But when you're just sitting by yourself and confronted with your thoughts, that's when the work gets done.
Mhm.
The healing and the work for the next phase of whatever we're going to do. And speaking of next phases, Rachel, you have been wonderful today, and I'm really excited about what you're doing. What's ahead for you? What are you working on? What's that next job?
You are probably going to be the first podcast to drop this, but
Oh,
I am pregnant.
what?
So not
Yes,
only
breaking news. Congratulations.
that's the next big project. Totally wasn't, planning it. And I adopted, and I remember I've told everyone, like, I never felt like I was missing something. And people
Mm,
are like, don't you want to carry your own child? I'm like, no, these are my children. Like, I'm fine. Trust me. God always has a different plan. That's what I've learned. I lost my father last year. It'll be a year, July 6th. And it just
right, right after I lost my dad. I'm sorry to
really
hear that. We both lost our dads. Yeah.
feels like a full circle moment for me. Like after a big loss comes life. So that's my biggest project right now is mom of 4. And this one I am birthing.
Well, congratulations. I am just genuinely happy for you. And it's, you know what? Love is love. You're going to, you probably are amazed at how much you could love children that, came from another mother. I'm amazed how much I love my grandkids. I was like, I didn't know I had this much love in me. So I just know that this baby is going to be surrounded by love. Have you told your kids yet?
Yes. Yes. Their reactions were hilarious. My oldest daughter said, "Oh, this is too much."
No, wow.
She's
The
all
8-year-old, one of
yeah.
the 8-year-olds said, "This is too much." Oh my.
And that is her personality. Like that is on brand for her. My son is just hoping that it's a boy because he's like, I'm surrounded. This is
I'm
not.
outnumbered.
And my youngest is pretty cool. She's the funny one. She's the wild card. You never know what she's gonna say, but she's been pretty chill. So
Well, as you know, once that little one is in the house, they're all just gonna melt like hot butter in July. It's gonna be delightful. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think that's my first scoop. I'm pretty excited. I'm excited about that and honored, Rachel, and very, very happy for you. I know you're gonna continue doing all of these amazing things and doing them well. How
Thank you.
can people connect with you, learn more about you and your organizations that you're working with?
So you can find me on dream.org's website. That's the organization, the nonprofit that I work for. And we are focused on closing prison doors and opening doors of opportunity. And there's a few ways that we do that. So you can learn more about that at dream.org. My website is www.theonlyrachel.com. So you can see all of the things that I'm involved in there. And then my handle on most social media is @theonlyrachel. All the ones that I'm on. It's @theonlyrachel.
At the only Rachel. That's THE1E, the only Rachel.
Yeah.
Got it. We'll definitely drop that in the show notes. But if somebody just needs to look you up right away, I want to make sure that they're able to do so and learn more about you. You've been an amazing guest. Thank you so much for your time and energy and the great things you're doing to serve our vast community.
Thank you, Dr. Mo.
This has been just a fantastic episode. I hope you guys have enjoyed it as much as I have. I appreciate your time. Thank you, listeners. Join us again next week for another informative, enlightening episode of Perpetual Motion with Dr. Mo Anderson. And wasn't that a great program? Oh, love that episode. I enjoyed it. I hope you did too. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Learn more about me on my website, drmoanderson.com. That's MOE. You can read book excerpts, watch videos, learn about my services that I offer, and book me for a speaking engagement. I'd love to talk with your group, and I'd love to work with you. So until the next time, review, renew, and renew. Thank you.